Well, welcome to this webinar. I'm going to talk today about omens. And first of all, I want to introduce myself. I think just about everybody who's on this call knows who I am. I'm Dory Cody. I live in Brunswick, Maine, and I am a shamanic practitioner and a teacher, and I have quite a few years of experience in shamanic healing and teaching. Um, Carrie Bancroft, who's an esteemed colleague and technical guru, is here with me today, thank God, and she's managing the technology so we can hopefully all enjoy sitting back and having a relaxed time talking and thinking about omens. And so if you have any questions about anything while I'm presenting, you can send questions to Carrie using that little chat feature that's on the top of your software. There's a little bubble there, like a spot where you can type in. So if you click on that, it's going to take you to the chat screen, and you can ask Carrie any questions about problems you might be having technically. And then also you can ask her any questions you might have about what I'm presenting, and she's going to compile those, and I'll have a period at the end of the webinar when I will take your questions one by one to answer. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about omens and about the fact that they're really not new agey or new to our modern day society. I'm going to give you some insight about how early records show that omens have been being used and honored by ancient ones for a very, very long time, millennia actually. And we're going to talk about how to view omens in these modern times and how we, from a shamanic perspective at least, might interpret and use omens to inform us, to amuse us at times, to educate us, and also, of course, to inspire us. We're going to talk about books that we often depend upon for interpretation of omens and how to use them as guides. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how to actually invite omens into our lives, as well as how to interpret the visits you might have from beloved deceased people and how they might appear to you in an omen kind of way. And then at the end, as I said, we're going to have about 15 minutes for you to ask questions or make comments by writing questions to Carrie in the chat box. So let's begin. I'd like to start with history. Historical records show that in ancient civilizations, the world was thought to be inhabited by supernatural forces. That's actually not all that different than what we believe today, right? We have similar beliefs, but they're tempered somewhat by centuries of scientific and philosophical findings about a larger worldview and the reasons behind unexpected events in the sky and on the earth. So if we trace back to the Mesopotamians, we find that omens, especially bad omens, were not to be taken lightly. And to some extent, the same is true today. We worry often about the omens that we see out in the world. And is that something that is helpful for us, or is it something that we really should be paying attention to? And then, interestingly enough, even in the second and third millennia BC, the beliefs were really not a lot different than ours, in that they understood that omens should be viewed as foretelling one of two things: either conditional truth or that they were, in fact, not irrevocable. So, in other words, they did not allow their lives to be ruled by the omens. They understood that they still had free will, and they could use their human gift of, reasoning to figure out, when they should pay attention and take an omen seriously, and when they could use their own minds to discern really what was the right thing to do. So, for instance, in the Egyptian Book of Dreams, is one of the earliest texts used for understanding the elements that we see in dreams, and the ways in which these elements in a dream had a meaning that was important to the dreamer often. And the earliest understanding of omens and psychology in the days before the birth of Christ were there in this book of dreams that was written, somewhere around 1790 BC, quite some time ago. So again, in so many ways, they were no different than we are today. And when it comes to our desire to understand phenomena, omens, dreams, events, we share that commonality with our ancestors. And I haven't a whole lot here about our native ancestors, the indigenous peoples, but it goes without saying that our indigenous ancestors were so in touch with the natural world and understood everything that was happening in their world that was a message from the spirits. And so they understood how to work with the omens in nature in ways that we're still learning about. So, as I said previously, since these ancient days happened long before a scientific understanding of the world, i- it was truly the only means they had of understanding and explaining the universe. They really had no other way. They used signs and messages in that way. So, for instance, what happened in the sky was almost always a portent of either good luck or bad luck or something to be feared either for today or for the future. Things like eclipses, comets, and things like that were interpreted depending upon the events that may have been happening, that they thought might happen, and what the viewers of the event interpreted. So, so events like these might have been a reason, for something like the ancient people to go to war or to surrender or to shoot the king or elect a new king. They understood these things in a way that that was fierce and often resulted in responses that were by our um, standards extreme. Nonetheless, they were very, very tuned into what was happening uh, in the world of what we would call symbology or omens. So, speaking of symbology, I'm very interested in the work of the Greek philosopher Plotinus, who lived in the second century AD, another guy who comes from that period of time. And he's said to be like the modern world's first symbologist, a person who was skilled at interpreting symbols. And his view was that he saw the world as a sacred text. And he saw it as written in the language of symbols. And more importantly, he believed that all phenomena harbor a deeper meaning beyond their obvious appearances. And so, if we apply the proper key, these meanings can be decoded and everyday life unveiled to show its deeper truths. However, he also worked from the premise that there were unseen forces communicating with him personally and who were sending important symbolic messages for him individually to interpret. And so he started seeing, the world view, the world messages, as something that was not necessarily to be interpreted in a worldwide kind of way, but really more for his own personal interpretation. And that's really important to me because it speaks to where I'm going with how we work with omens and symbols in our modern culture. So, how do we sort out in our modern culture what is a phenomena and what is just an everyday occurrence and not really an omen. So, for instance, we might ask, like here on the screen, when is the sighting of an eagle overhead truly an omen? When is it just an eagle being an eagle? And to understand this, we really have to explore a bit more about the literal omen versus the metaphorical omen. And this is a really important thing for us to understand as modern day um, practitioners of the healing arts, because we can really go astray if we don't understand the difference between these two kinds of symbols or omens. So, a literal omen might go something like this. I made this up, obviously. You're told by an unknown person that you meet at a bus stop that you have such a glow, you must be pregnant. Now, discounting the fact that that would be a very inappropriate thing for someone to say to you at a bus stop, someone that you have never met before, um, you do end up musing about this interesting thing that this person says to you, like, what? She thinks I have a glow and I must be pregnant? What the heck? So, on your way home, you stop at the drugstore and you get a pregnancy test and you go home and you really don't believe there's any possible way you could be pregnant. It does not make any sense. But nonetheless, this was such an oddity that you decide to take the pregnancy test. And lo and behold, it shows positive. You are pregnant. Holy cow. um, that is a literal omen. Okay? That is a literal message that has come to you through the mouth of someone you've never met before, giving you a little jiggle, a little insight that you should pay attention to something that you weren't paying attention to. It's a literal omen. It's a direct message. It doesn't require decoding of any kind. I mean, the test is very clearly there. Yeah, positive. I am pregnant, by God. There's no getting around this. And that lady at the bus stop saw something that I wasn't able to see in myself. So, using the sighting of the eagle as another example, let's say you're a big fan of the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not, but some people are. And you happen to be vacationing in Maine and you're thinking about the Philadelphia Eagles. And just then, an eagle flies into your view right overhead. That again is a literal omen. You were thinking about the Philadelphia Eagles, and there, lo and behold, is an eagle. It's a message saying, "Yep, we are the Eagles, and here we are. We're connecting with your thinking process of the Philadelphia Eagles." Chances are this eagle does not come from Philadelphia, it comes from Maine, but nonetheless, it's an eagle and it's responding in some way, in a very literal way, to your thinking about the Philadelphia Eagles. So those are literal omens, and they're much easier to understand. They're very direct. They don't require decoding. We know how to work with them. We can sometimes be quite amused by them. Probably the woman who ended up being pregnant was not quite so amused, but who knows? Um, so, the much more common, however, and really challenging omens are the metaphorical ones. And things like dreams and the appearance of in the material or the non-material world, like in a journey, images, symbols, animals, sounds, smells, tastes, other phenomena, they require a lot more skill and intuition to interpret. And these omens are the ones that we're going to spend the balance of our time talking about today. Note that the literal omen is the least common occurrence, okay? It really doesn't occur all that often. When it does, it gets our attention. But the metaphorical omens are those that we are faced with day in and day out. and the ones that can give us tremendous pleasure, and ooh and ah, an opening of the heart out of nowhere, or they can also be incredibly frustrating and drive us crazy because we don't understand them. And both of those extremes are true. We we can be amused and entertained and incredibly moved by omens, and also driven to distraction by them because we don't understand what in what in God's name this omen is all about. So the most important thing to understand about metaphorical omens is that they are metaphors. They're just that. They're metaphors. And a metaphor does not mean the same thing to each person, nor should it be interpreted the same way in every situation. So, in other words, the sighting of an eagle today might be an omen about one thing. The sighting of an eagle tomorrow might be an omen of something completely different. And that's where we have to take the wisdom of the original symbologist, Plotinus, at heart, because he began to understand that metaphorical messages, omens, symbols, and what have you, were very individual. They were for his individual interpretation, not for necessarily the world at large. So, what I'm aiming at here is that what we have to understand is that not every occurrence of seeing an animal or a bird or an insect or a cloud is a metaphorical omen that requires our decoding. Sometimes a bird is just a bird. And like Carrie put on this slide, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. It's really not anything more than that. And so we have to really come to understand ourselves in a deep way to know, well, when is it important for me to know that this bird is not just a bird, but really something important for me to pay attention to? So here's an example. Let's say you have a dear friend who died a few years ago. And you know from your journeying experience or from your own intuition, or maybe even because this person, when she died, said, "Look out, because when after I'm gone, I'm going to come back to you as a beautiful male cardinal." So she comes to visit you in this world in that form, the form of this amazing, magnificent male cardinal in all his glory with red feathers. So when you see a cardinal, it's a moving experience and a true metaphorical omen of the presence of this beloved friend who has passed over. Your dear friend's spirit is coming to visit you, and you know this, and you're moved every time you sight this magnificent cardinal. But let's say another person, completely different person, has a beautiful backyard and has a pair of cardinals living, nearby, and she or he sees these cardinals often. They come, they feed, seed on the ground, and she sees them almost daily through the year, even in the wintertime. So, is every appearance of the cardinal in that case an omen for her? Probably not. But let's say on a particular day, she happens to be worried about her daughter, and this daughter is late getting home from school. So she's pacing around and worrying about it all, and the cardinal lands on the railing of her porch and sings to her. Now, she knows the cardinal does not usually do this. She's never seen the cardinal land on the railing of the porch, nor has it ever just like sat there and sung to her. So that may be an omen. The cardinal may be coming, and who knows what the cardinal is saying? It's for her to decode. The cardinal might be saying, "Come sing with me. There's nothing to worry about. Look at how beautiful I am. Take your mind off worrying so much." Or perhaps the cardinal is coming to distract her from her worry and helps her get the internal insight that she worries too much and that she should focus more on the beauty of nature and not be so entangled in her own worried mind. So, the result of this obviously is very dependent upon whether her daughter comes and walks through the door and, is just a couple of minutes late or or her daughter truly is lost. But here's what most of us do in this kind of situation. We're worried. We see the cardinal. We're like, what does this mean? I got to pay attention to this. This cardinal is singing to me. My daughter is late. What is happening? So, what do we do? The first thing many of us do is go to the books, right? What does animal spirit have to say about the meaning of cardinal? Or what do the animal cards have to say about the meaning of cardinal? Or some other book or books? My recommendation is that this person skip the books altogether and go first to her own heart and ask a lot of questions. What does this cardinal represent to her? Does the cardinal make her feel happy? Does she love its color? Is its song annoying to her? I mean, cardinals are kind of loud, so, for some people, a cardinal can be annoying. Or, does its song really open her heart? Does she feel relaxed when she sees the cardinals? After all, they're a familiar sight. They might be to her, a sign that all is well. They make her feel secure because there's some continuity there. The cardinals are always there. So the answers to these kinds of questions are the first clues to her or the possible meaning of the cardinal's appearance on her porch in that moment on that day. As I said, maybe the cardinal is telling her to relax, stop worrying, just come sing with me, reminding you to lighten up, no need to worry. And hopefully, then her daughter walks in the door and, she is able to relax and recognize that the cardinal really was a beautiful distraction. Um, so, the point here is that there is absolutely no empirical way to interpret the appearance of any object, person, or animal, or tree, or cloud, or anything else. It is very personal. It's very individualized, which is why um, the books are not necessarily all that helpful. So, what about the books? Why do they even exist? Well, one could say it was a way for someone to publish their own interpretation of animals and omens in order to, voice their own opinion in writing. Do they have some value? Probably, yes. They certainly do because I refer to them a lot. I refer to them mostly when I want to have some understanding of the archetype. What is the archetypal understanding of these various animals or other symbols or sightings? Um, but for the most part, we really have to be clear that that's what these are. They're archetypes, they're the author's interpretation. They're not to be taken literally because they are metaphors. You know, it's not unlike how we understand many fundamentalist um, religious people, whether it's Christians or Islamists or others, interpret written materials in a very literal way. Let's use Christians as an example because I'm much more familiar with Christianity. They see the Bible, they read the Bible, and they take it word by word in literal meaning. When in fact, scholars of the Bible, I happen to have somebody I live with who's a biblical scholar, they understand that the Bible is a metaphor. It's a huge metaphorical message to be decoded, to be understood with the heart, with a broader understanding than just the literal words. So the same is true for us. We can get so caught up in the literal um, meaning of omens by relying on certain books as like our Bible that we really miss the point, which is that omen is personal, it's metaphorical, and it's meant for each one of us to understand on our own individual way, in our own path. So to rely on one book or a group of books is really to rob yourself, as I see it, from the personal experience of knowing deeply what the appearance of a particular omen is for you in that moment. Remembering that when you see a metaphor, it's just that, it's a metaphor. So to interpret metaphors in a universal way without looking at your own personal meaning or potentially your own interpretation, then it could potentially be leading you down the wrong path. That's why, using the books as the Bible is really not helpful as I see it. So, using metaphorical omens as an example, let's say I'm doing a journey for you. Most of you here listening to this message, to this webinar, are people who know how to journey. And if you aren't, you're probably going to learn sometime soon. So, if we use metaphorical omens in a journey, let's say I'm in a journey and I'm asking at your request about what changes you need to make in your life in order to be happier. I'm just making this up, obviously. So I'm in the journey and I see a big British Airways 747 in the journey. I might inappropriately, frankly, and it would be inappropriate, um, think or interpret that because I saw this British Airways 747 in the journey, that you're meant to move to Great Britain. That's what's going to make you happy. And I would be very mistaken in interpreting this for you in that way because you may see this metaphor in a very different way than I would see it. The British Airways 747 might mean something completely different to you. Maybe the digit 747 means something to you. Maybe Great Britain means something completely different to you. Maybe the United Kingdom means something to you. Maybe the colors of the plane mean something to you. I don't know, and I would not be accurate, and I would be very wrong to interpret that for you. You need to interpret it for yourself. It's personal. So, other than doing a shamanic journey for ourselves to understand more about omens, I have developed over time a way that helps me to understand how to consider and observe the interpretation of omens' meanings. So, I have a whole series of questions that I ask myself and that I coach other people to ask themselves. And they're here on a slide, and you don't need to write all these down because you're going to get a recording of this webinar, and the recording will have all the slides, and so you will have this at your disposal. But what's important is go through this list of things because the meaning of an omen is very different depending upon so many factors. So, I don't need to read all of these to you. You see them out front of you here. But for those of you who might choose to only listen to this webinar, I will go through them quickly. So you want to know, what were you doing when you saw or heard or smelled or felt the presence of a fox, as an example? What were you thinking when you saw, heard, smelled, or felt the fox? What were you feeling? What did you see, hear, or smell or feel at the beginning of something? In other words, did you see the fox or smell the fox or feel the fox's presence when at a time when you were beginning something new, an adventure, a job, a relationship? Or was something ending at the time that you saw this fox? a relationship, a job, a a contract, or what? Was there something that was coming to closure? Did it show up at a time of a very special event in your life? A wedding, a funeral, the birth of a child, good news, bad news, a funeral, whatever. What was happening around you when you saw this? Was there a lot of clamor? Were there a lot of people? Were you by yourself? Were you with other people? Were you indoors or were you outdoors? Did you see it in a dream? Was that dream a lucid dream? Were you stressed or were you peaceful when you saw the fox? Did you have an accident when you saw the fox? Um, so all of those are, ways of seeing, what does this omen potentially mean for me? Also examine things like, did someone die when you saw the fox? Did that coincide with someone's death? Um, do you dislike foxes or do you like foxes? Are you afraid of foxes? Are you intrigued by foxes? Ask yourself all those questions because those are all keys to understanding how this omen or why this omen is showing up for you today under these circumstances at this time as a potential message or to be a messenger or to be a um, a key element of understanding something that is going on in your life. So there are lots of tales and meanings of various sightings of animals and birds. Um, some cultures unfortunately believe that the sighting of a dead crow is a very, very bad omen. And there are other cultures that believe that the sighting of a dead crow is just that the crow has died, and perhaps the crow has died to gift you its feathers, not necessarily that omen. And again, let's go back to talking a little bit about our native ancestors. If we look at the ways that different tribal peoples interpreted the presence of different animals, it is actually dizzying. There is some commonality, but in many cases, not that much commonality between, what one group of tribal people believed was the power of a rabbit, and other tribal people believed was the power of a rabbit or a turtle or a fox or a wolf or a moose or whatever. And so, you know, again, it's a reminder to us that it isn't empirical. There is nothing empirical about these interpretations, and they're either an interpretation within your own tribal people, like some of you who are in my apprenticeship programs or hollow bone programs. We have our own omen, our own power animal. So if the power animal of your circle is the beluga whale, and you turn on the TV tonight to National Geographic, and they're showing something about the history or the biology of beluga whales. Wow, that's an omen for you, not just you, but for your whole tribe, right? Um, but the truth is that for the most time, for every symbol, there is a potential omen which is unique to that individual. And that is a really important thing to remember. So, speaking of crows, it reminded me of my own mother's story. She, often related from her own memory that when her father died when she was 18, that within minutes of her hearing about his death, a crow was cawing outside the window. And for the rest of her life, and she lived a lot of years beyond her father's death, she lived like another 60 or 65 years or so. She absolutely was terrified of crows. And every time she heard one cawing, she had this sense, oh my God, somebody has died. And there was no way of talking her out of it. It was her entrenched belief. And so it it really didn't serve her well in any way to have made that generalization about crows. And so, again, I'm going back to remembering it's a unique situation. Yes, there may have been a link between the crows cawing and her getting the news that her father died. And it could very well be that the crow was carrying the message, you know, all is well. I have your father in the spirit world now. But her interpretation was so limited that it frightened her. So, the importance of exploring and really looking deeply at what could this possibly mean for me now under these circumstances. So, remember, um, that for every animal, every incidence of weather, every cloud formation, every tree leaf, which reminds me, in the Celtic traditions, they have understandings of the meaning of the different leaves of all of the different trees. And, you can be married to that interpretation, or you can take it and look at it and say, wow, that's really pretty interesting. And another tool that I might add to my tool bag of things that I can use as archetypes for understanding what's happening with these omens. So again, every tree leaf, every bird, every insect, every sound, smell, motion, or confluence of events, um, is a potential omen, but it's unique to each individual experiencing that omen. Really important to remember. Now, that doesn't discount the fact that you should talk to other people. You know, even though the omen is unique to you, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, flush it out with other people. Ask for help or advice about an omen. What do you think? How would you interpret this? What are your thoughts about this? And it might help you to process it, particularly if it's very troublesome. Um, Visit the idea of an omen in a journey. Explore with the hearts and minds of your colleagues, your friends, and see, you know, if that helps you to understand better why this particular omen is showing up for you. So, going back again to the ancient times, kings, queens, and those in aristocracy, they had the capacity to consult with wizards, sorcerers, conjurers, shamans, and others, about the future. And they did that regularly. They asked for insights about what they saw in the stars. That was really big. What do you see in the stars? What do you see in the cards? What do you see in the stones? What do you see in the bones? And, these advanced seers, um, they were skilled at understanding their own means of interpreting, the various different omens. Just like, I have omens, I understand when I'm in a journey and I see a particular thing, I've come to know that my helping spirit is showing me that because it means a particular thing. Like when my power animal shows up with a lab jacket and a stethoscope, I understand what she's trying to show me is that there's something physical that we should be paying attention to with regard to this client. So, just in the same way, these seers, these very skilled shamans or sorcerers, they had their own way of interpreting whatever was happening in the skies, on the earth, the movement of the stars. And they paid attention to all this, and they actually began to catalog, what is happening with the stars. Ooh, this month, oh, that star is in a different location than it was last month. What does that mean? And they began to interpret how things were different and what it meant that they were different. So they became experts, really, in the field of omens. So in today's world, we also have these experts. Um, and they're available to us. I love this. It's totally an omen, this slide says. So we have these experts available to us. And, they might be our astrologer. They might be a tarot reader. They might be a shaman or shamanic practitioner or someone like that. And they can help guide us to understand new ways of interpreting an omen that we are seeing or that we're curious about. Um, but I want to again repeat how very, very important it is to not give up your power to another person's interpretation of your omens. It is it is that expert's way of looking at this and seeing it through their eyes, through their spirit helper's eyes. And yet, it's good for you to take that and understand that you still have your power, your capacity to reason and understand how that information that you get from the astrologer or someone else fits together with the big picture that you have in your own heart, your own personal understanding. Um, so I also want to spend some time in this webinar talking about how you might play with inviting omens into your life. The spirits really do want to play with you. They want to communicate always. And if you begin to pay attention to the many, many metaphors that are available to you, either in this reality or in spirit reality, then you can open up the gateway to an incredibly meaningful conversation with the essence of the nature spirits who are showing up, in the form of nature to give us information that might be helpful to us. So let's say, for instance, again, using this as an example, you're struggling, you're feeling disappointed and angry with someone, you're having a hard time letting it go. You could ask for intentional omens to be shown. You can open your heart and say, hey, Spirit, show me a sign. Give me some guidance here about what I need to know so that I can open my heart to this person because I'm really sick and tired of being angry at him or her or whoever. So you ask for this sign or omen and you go about your day. You don't even really think about it a whole lot more. But then you make note of seeing a little white butterfly in your flower garden later in the day. And then again, sometime later on that same day, you see another white butterfly while you're out, queuing dinner for your family. And then you go back and you sit on your back deck to have a cup of tea in the evening, and you see yet a third white butterfly. Now, at this point, you should be asking yourself, is this white butterfly showing up as an omen that I need to pay attention to that is in some way an answer to how I might open my heart again to this person with whom I'm angry? So, Spirit may very well have sent you this white butterfly as an omen. And now it's up to you to interpret, what does white butterfly mean to me? Does the color white mean something to me? Does the flight of the white butterfly, does the lightheartedness mean something to me? Does the fact that butterflies really don't live very long mean something to me? Does the fact that butterflies are really very, very tender beings, and if you hold them in your hand and you rub their wings, you are actually really killing them because the substance on their wings is what keeps them protected. All of those things are potentially metaphors for you around this particular situation. And that's how you work with asking for an omen. So you ask for an omen and then don't run to the books and say, oh, what does white butterfly mean? Because it may not have anything to do with your personal situation. You have to go inside your heart, go examine, go ask all those questions that we talked about earlier so that you can get for yourself an understanding of this omen. Um, And then, of course, use your shamanic journeying skills if you have shamanic journeying skills. And if you don't, use meditation skills or other kinds of skills that will help you to understand. Maybe if you are still bothered by it, you go visit with an expert, a shaman, an astrologer, tarot card reader, somebody who can help you, by adding their own insight to your own personal understanding of how to interpret this omen. So, there's a whole lot more that we can say about omens, and it's not possible to cover it all in a short webinar. But I would like to leave this conversation by saying, you know, explore the world of omens with an open heart and mind, and work at your interpretation skills on your own. And so I would like now to open this up to some questions. I don't know if any of you in the audience listening live might have a question or two about anything that I have said. And I would very much like to answer anything someone would like to ask at this point. If you haven't already sent a chat message to Carrie, this is a good time to do that. I'll take a minute and get a sip of water while any of you might want to take a minute to type a question. I see somebody has written. I don't think I have any questions, but it was a very helpful presentation, though. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. It's been fun putting this together, and those of you who are here, I think all know that this is a maiden voyage for me and for Carrie working with me as my technical guru and backup, and it's been a lot of fun to put this together and to scheme about exactly all the various tools that we could use to put it together. So okay, I see somebody else has asked here, how about asking for specific questions from a deceased loved one? Yeah, that's a great question. I'd like to answer that before we close. So, if you have a deceased loved one that you really would like to open up some communication with, what I recommend you do is, if you have journeying skills, you could journey to a helping spirit and ask, could you give me some information about what I should look for or listen for um, as a message from this sister or whoever the person is who's your beloved who has died. So you could do that. You could ask for advice and see, could you tell me, hey, is my sister showing up? And if she is she coming as a hummingbird? Is she coming as the sound of, does she make the wind chimes chime when there's no wind? Or tell me, what is it that is my sign that I should be paying attention to? So that's one way. Another way is, to either, if you have journeying skills, you could journey to the spirit of your deceased beloved and ask them directly, how are you showing up for me? Now, having said that, I know it's really pretty intimidating to do your own journey to somebody who has been really very close to you, and they can be extremely challenging on lots of levels, not to mention the emotional. So you could ask somebody else. You could ask somebody else who has who has shamanic journeying skills to journey to the spirit of that deceased loved one and ask them directly, how are you communicating with so and so? Tell me, how are you showing up? Are you showing up in rainbows or what? So those are some ways that you could get some advice about that. And someone else just asked, can you communicate with the omen as you would a guide or a power animal? And I would say, if you have an omen showing up repeatedly, um, in the form of an animal or a bird or some living being, then um, I would journey if you have journeying skills and ask, why are you showing up for me in ordinary reality? What is it that I need to know about your presence? Um, I had, as an example, many years ago, I had flying squirrels in the attic of my house that almost drove me insane because they were keeping us awake at night. Um, they would go out hunting and they'd come back around 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was a lot of clamor in the attic. And we spent a lot of time and energy trying to figure out how to have them leave the attic. So, ultimately, I, finally got it after a while. Dory, journey to the spirit of flying squirrel and find out what flying squirrel is here to tell you. And once you have listened to that, perhaps they will leave on their own. And so that's the kind of thing that, the shamanic journeying skills are invaluable and, can be used for all kinds of things. So it looks to me like we've come to the end of the questions and actually pretty much to the end of our time together here. Um, I just want to end by saying thank you so much for hanging out with me, for spending time, for your interest in omens. You're going to get a copy of the recording of this in your inbox, within the next 24 hours. And you'll get the recording and the slides, and hope you'll listen to it and feel free to share it. Share it with others. This is a free webinar. I have, I'm happy to have you share it widely, because my passion is about sharing what I know with others. And so, I don't have any strong sense of copyright this information, and I encourage you to share it. And, hopefully you'll join us for the next webinar, which is going to be on Wednesday, July 27th at 1 o'clock. And we're going to talk about the creative power animals. And I have no doubt I'll have a lot of fun putting that together with Carrie. And hopefully it will be as powerful as this, if not better. And don't forget to visit my new website, which Carrie is the amazing, amazing technical marketing guru, saint, and magician who created this website, this new website for me. And if you haven't already seen it, please do. It's dorycody.com. There are a whole lot of classes and offerings on my website now, far more than I have ever had. I'm teaching more and more and more, loving it more and more. And feel free to share the link to the website as well. And so I wish you all well, a fabulous ending to this day. And Carrie is reminding me, don't forget to mention the podcasts. Those are like 20-minute intensive classes too, and it is true, and they are free. And you can go to SoundCloud from my website and see all 63 podcasts that I have there and listen to them when you're driving your car or cooking your dinner or whatever you might be doing. Carrie has organized them in an incredibly beautiful way with graphics broken down into topic month by month, and it's all free. And I channel those podcasts; they don't come from my mind. So there's this tremendous spirit wisdom there. Bye for now. Hope you have enjoyed this time together. I surely have, and I'll look forward to seeing or hearing from you at our next podcast, our next webinar or before. Be well.